Larry Keeley is coming down. In your last bag, you have some blocks, and they're amazing blocks. That's the repeat. Much of the work on the blocks was done by John Nesbitt's daughter in Larry Keeley's office, the J. Doblin Group. And each year, Larry and his group obsesses on this conference and starts to craft a speech which I think now has become legendary because they're so beautifully put together. I'm building your expectation. I think it'll be well met. Larry Keeley.
Richard's right, we do get a little nutty. But there's a reason. You know, I've been coming to this conference for every single one, except the first one when my wife and I were busy having a baby, and it didn't seem like a good idea to travel. Two things strike me about the TED meetings that happen with such ferocity and such power in this place. One thing that strikes me is that the audience is unbelievable. It's the first thing that I noticed. Richard's always said it, of course. He's always said, you are the audience. But I've watched as this audience has sort of grown together and started to create truly powerful new parts of the world, sometimes together, sometimes separately. So the power in the audience knocks me out. The second thing about the TED conferences that astonish me is the way that they put together surprising things, things that kind of connect for each other, that there's always this power of emergent themes. There hasn't been a TED that I've gone to where sometime thereafter, in some strange process of marination, I haven't changed some aspect of my life, sometimes very fundamentally and sometimes just modestly. But those things are what make this an extraordinary thing. And my colleagues and I have made a commitment every year to producing some sort of research and development and giving it away. Because our thought is that if we can give it away to this extraordinary audience, some astonishing things will be birthed out of it. Now, we've been brooding on a topic some, in this obsessive way that Richard cites, and that topic has to do with what we're calling compelling experiences. And frankly, it does have a gestation, like most of the things that we develop. The gestation in this case was the fact that I had grown weary of being asked the same question endlessly by any number of clients. What works on the web? What are the business models? Okay? You hear this question all the time. From the very first time that I heard it, it struck me as the wrong question, asked in the wrong way, and certainly at the wrong time in history. But because I was at a conference of young business school types at the Northwestern University in Chicago, it really got brought home to me when I saw a number of slides in a row. Okay? Question number one, posed by the MBA students to a group of invited luminaries, was, what's making money on the web? Question number two, what are the business models for making money on the web? Question number three, what can we be doing to make money on the web? And, you know, you say to yourself, geez, isn't there a richer way we can look at these things? And this issue that we've been brooding on has to do with the DNA that might make something interesting. Think about it this way. I had one of my secondary researchers check. It turns out there's no law that requires you to go out on the web. And given that there is no law, guess what? It's voluntary, right? And people only go there because they think they might like it. And from wherever they start to wherever they go, they only go to places that turn out to be interesting. You know, it's really fascinating. This pattern keeps coming up again and again. And so you start to wonder, well, what do we know about making things interesting? What have we ever known? What can we possibly know about the history of humankind about making things interesting. What is it that causes people to go to things when they have the freedom to go anywhere? Where do they spend a disproportionate amount of their time or their dollars or whatever? And that's what we've been puzzling through. And I'll take you through some examples. If I could have the slides, please. And please just stick me in the dark so that people can see the slides. I don't... All right. Here's this nutty guy. He's in a kayak. He's falling 30 feet in the air. Happens to be in Colorado. Okay? These are people doing this more often than ever before, and at greater numbers, and in more and more sort of extreme sports. We have a whole regular TV broadcast channel devoted to the phenomenon. Another cheap form of thrills and chills is this hotel you can go to only in the month of August. It's 125 miles inside the Arctic Circle, and it is very, very cold. There are 14 ornately carved hotel rooms in this place in Lapland. You get some reindeer skins and some branches to sleep on. You can go there for a wedding. You can be baptized, but only if your name has IS in it, which is the Swedish word for ice. There is, of course, a fireplace in the room, but it's an electric fireplace because they don't want it to warm up. This only happens, by the way, in the month of August when it warms up enough here to be able to carve out this igloo. All right? That's an interesting, compelling experience. Here's one that you can have with Charlie Trotter in a restaurant in New Orleans. Pay $150 per person. You sit 4 feet from him as he prepares your 10 to 12 course meal, comes and sits with you and chats about it. If you want to go there, plan ahead. We checked earlier today. The next available opening is the 9 o'clock seating on May 14th. So this is not the only place that does it. It's a growing pattern, but it is one of several places that do it. In a rinky-dink little town in Minnesota, some enterprising entrepreneur has converted a series of jails, courtrooms, jury rooms into a hotel. You can pay $115 a night to go there and stay there. This is the deluxe suite. It's got the bars, it's got the shackles, and it's got the jacuzzi. This is Sigaya in Kyushu, Japan. It's quite a ways south of Tokyo. There are 280 feet of pristine, perfect beach along here. A simulation of a volcano that goes off regularly throughout the day. 4 to 5 times a day, there are perfect computer-generated tubular waves that people can use. People, in fact, pay $38 per person to go there in salt-free, chlorinated water. Sky opens up, or the ceiling opens up on beautiful days. These people are 440 yards away from the Pacific Ocean. You can pay to go to a dude ranch where you can learn about storytelling and poetry and sit around the campfire and do something to master a few skills that you're not good at. That's an interesting phenomenon, is how much money people are willing to pay these days for unusual experiences. One of the hot vacation spots right now is Siberia. You pay an exorbitant amount of money for sort of sensory deprivation. But here at a dude ranch, you can go and learn how to master a few skills these days. Similarly, people are mastering skills in greater numbers than ever before by learning to climb mountains, in this case in the Grand Tetons. And finally, a compelling experience can be had by anyone who buys a ticket to Cirque du Soleil. And as we noted earlier from people who had talked about that, that is in fact something this audience is very familiar with. Extraordinary human performances, incredible minimalist work, the bringing together of extraordinary costumes and fantastic music in an experience that if you haven't had it before, you surely should. Cirque du Soleil is a compelling experience. Now, the thing that's interesting to me is not just this class of compelling experiences, because we've had a great many of those over the last 3 days. People who know what it is to produce a compelling experience. Jackie Torrance, right? Peter Bergman. Incredible, compelling experiences. What's interesting to us at Doblin Group is how many things exist on the cusp. Things that are not normally compelling, but are being made compelling in some interesting way. Some examples. One of the most successful lines of corporate video training tapes are these ones done by the Monty Python team and John Cleese in particular. Incredibly successful line of corporate training information, right? By making it fun. Similarly, the enormous success of Dilbert, now the best-selling business advice books out there. Oprah Winfrey discovered that she had 15 to 21 million regular viewers, the vast majority of whom were not regular book readers. She took it upon herself to try and change that pattern. And she originally did it by surprise, just choosing a book and only to discover that when she featured books, they tended to go to extraordinary heights of sales, and publishers were often back-ordered, and her viewers were inconvenienced. So now she tells them in advance with the expectation that they will donate 10,000 copies to local libraries so that everybody that she talks to can be readers, and she's doing a tremendous job of sort of inculcating a habit of reading amongst people who are demographically not very likely to read novels, at least historically. Okay? Pretty fascinating shift. Similarly, when you look at what Philippe Starck has been doing with Ian Schrager, it's pretty extraordinary. These guys achieve in the Ian Schrager hotels 98% occupancy rates in an industry that achieves only 81% average occupancy rates just by being obsessive and nutty about design. The Paramount's a particularly interesting example. Original design target was to produce a hotel room in New York City that would be really, really stylish and hip, but profitable at only $100 per room per day at the lowest end of their rooms quality. They have been at it now for 14 or 15 years. They're extremely profitable at room rates as low as $160 a night. For those of you that go to New York from time to time, you know that that's astonishingly low. And it's a place where people really want to be seen. In the Dean and DeLuca Coffee Bar and the Whiskey Bar, really interesting example of taking extraordinary, approaches to ordinary quotidian things that were around. And that's really where our topic starts to get interesting. The idea that we might be able to figure out the DNA of compelling experiences and turn it into news you can use, a very important Doblin Group theme, as you know. Okay, so let's take a look at whether or not the topic itself is interesting. I mean, one of the things that's really important to do is to have some facts. And unfortunately, you can't just go to an Alta Vista search and say, gee, are compelling things more successful today than they used to be? It turns out to take some really powerful reasoning and some fact gathering. Okay? So let's begin by looking at how people are spending their money. Since 1970, personal spending on recreation has tripled to $304 billion a year globally. That turns out to be a closet full of cash. That recreation as a percentage of total spending, this is to say, compared to everything else people are spending money on, again globally, has nearly doubled in that same period of time. So people are spending more money on their forms of recreation, just collectively. Turns out to be very, very difficult statistics to amass, but wait, there's more. How do they spend their time? Okay, what do people do with their time? Since 1980, certified scuba divers have increased 600% to 3 million. Cruise ship passengers have tripled to 4.5 million. And the analysis is that they're still at 2% of the capacity, or roughly 4% now, of the capacity that they'd like to be about the year 2005. The amusement park attendance has nearly doubled to 260 million people annually. Those kinds of facts tell us that people are spending more time and more money as a percentage. Businesses are obviously beginning to recognize this. They may not recognize it consciously, but they recognize it in the way they build things. So looking at investment patterns, we discover that since 1990, $6 billion was spent on new hotel construction just in Las Vegas alone. $3.5 billion were spent on sports arenas in the United States, and Disney has spent $2.5 billion to launch the Celebration cruise lines. Okay? This is an example of investment spending. Businesses do not normally do that randomly. They try to figure out what it is they're going to get as a return on that investment. Let's next look at the ways in which creative performers are reaping some rewards. Our hometown hero, Michael Jordan, has taken home $223 million in direct compensation since 1990. That's a fairly short period of time to do fairly well. By the way, there's an interesting corollary to that. There was a recent analysis by the city of Chicago, which here, before Michael Jordan, was best known for Al Capone, you know, that's what people do all over the world. Michael Jordan, it turns out, is worth an estimated $4 billion to the city of Chicago in its market value worldwide. Oprah Winfrey earned $171 million in the last 2 years. The top 200 athletes in all sort of sports collectively earned over $1 billion in endorsements just last year alone. And since 1986, the average Major League Baseball salary has nearly tripled to $1.1 million. Okay? This is an example that the individuals with talent who can perform, who can do things that are compelling, are in fact reaping powerful rewards. And the corporations that are disproportionately in these kinds of industries are also doing exceptionally well. Since 1980, box office grosses in movies have doubled to $585 million, nearly billion. Sporting goods sales have tripled, and gambling revenues have quadrupled to $44.4 billion. So this is an important topic. That's only if you look at the things that are supposed to be compelling. What if we look at the idea of making things compelling beyond that? And that's what we wanted to do, to take it apart. That's the topic we brooded on. And what you're seeing in these 3 starbursts is already the beginnings of the structure that I'm going to reveal for you in the form of news you can use. What is it? How cool? Let's do it again. The structure of compelling experiences, which we're pleased to give away here at TED this year as a sort of example for you. And I know some of you are scrambling to take notes. Don't bother. The blocks you got give you all of the information that you'll need to capture this, okay? For those of you that shipped it off, I'm sorry. For those of you that already chucked it out before you shipped it off, I'm particularly sorry. But we'll do our best to make up for it. Now this miserable-looking person is one of the ways in which Doblin Group tries to unpack everyday life, right? We've got over 2,000 hours of videotapes of people trying to travel in airplanes, airports, and airport lounges and stuff like that. Just one example of stuff we do in the real world, trying to document the sort of crimes against humanity that we all suffer as we go through the things that pass for customer service these days, okay? So you can take apart things like everyday life. You can use the digital tools that surround us to try and find what's going on there. We use digital cameras, and we even use disposable cameras and field notebooks and software tools we've had to write. We do all kinds of things with amazing research librarians and secondary literature to sort of go through clouds and clouds of real information that's printed and cyberspace information that is impossible to volumetrically represent. And we try to find those patterns. We load those all into computer systems in order to find, the ways in which these things are clustering in order to discern the patterns. I'm not going to tell you too much about the sort of misery under the covers. What I am pleased to do is to give you the punchline right away. Okay? Compelling experiences, it turned out, have 3 stages with 6 attributes. 3 stages, 6 attributes. I know it's a little hard to remember so far. It's going to come out in the blocks, and I'm going to give you examples of how it works. But it turns out it doesn't matter whether it's a circus, a parade, a wedding, a concert, a Broadway show, a sexual performance, a seasonal celebration, a party, a TED conference. They have these very recurring structures. 3 stages, 6 attributes. Let's take a look. Mardi Gras happened just, 10 days ago or so. And people learn about Mardi Gras. They hear about it from their friends. There's a buzz on the streets. They talk about it. Anybody that's been there before is willing to tell you how great it is. You read some things about it, and you find out that that you go, that you gain, you put yourself into a costume typically because you know you're not supposed to behave normally. Eventually you get out in the crowd, you find people in varying stages of dress and undress and varying stages of chemical alteration, and you find that the place is just nutty. There's these floats going by, there's people with pitchforks tossing beads off of the back. There typically is a period of time immediately after the festivities when one is recovering slightly from all of these compelling experiences, and then thereafter it turns out that you're changed, that you have some souvenir that is part of your personal environment. Okay? Now that turns out to be a powerful example of the recurring structure of compelling experiences. Here's what happens. There's 3 distinct stages and 2 transitions. There's an attraction, transition where you enter, an engagement, a transition where you exit, and an extension. This pattern reoccurs again and again with any compelling experience. Let's go back to Mardi Gras again. You're attracted when you learn about things. You enter as you start to gain your costume. You have the experience, and it's very engaging during that period of time. You exit, and then you are extended that in some basic form. Okay? That's the structure of a compelling experience. Let's test it among our audience members. Okay? Some of you are TED virgins. You'll remember that you heard about it from someplace. Right? You'll remember that people told you you must go. People whose opinions you respected told you you must go. There came a time and we heard the beautiful singing of Amazing Grace. And we knew it had started. We'd gone through a portal, a structure, frankly, which reoccurs every session and every day of TED. Soon, you're into the experiences. Some of them grab you incredibly. Others of them piss you off. But you get the experiences that you're really trying to get while you're here. Eventually, we see the Tedzilla film. We get the other thrilled pack experiences that I'm standing between you now and preventing you from having. And eventually, you take these things home. How many of you have a collection of your admission badges from all prior TEDs? Yeah, there's a lot of hands up. I don't know if you can see them, but people keep these things. It's a perfect example of an extension. And they keep their bags full of stuff or their bears or other things like that. Okay, so that's the 3 stages. Now that turns out to be the easy and obvious part. Lots of social scientists will tell you about the 3 recurring stages of important experiences. Okay? All rituals have 3 stages. But the 6 attributes is where the real discovery came this year. It's where we really got something that turned out to be unusual, powerful, and news you can use. 6 of them: defined, fresh, immersive, accessible, significant, transformative. Don't bother trying to write them down. You've already got them on the blocks. I'll show you what I mean. Okay? Define things. Do you know what it is? Can you describe it? Do the pieces sort of pull together in some sort of coherent whole? Okay? Those are the characteristics of something that's defined. A perfect example of that is a Chinatown in any major city. There's a portal, there's a gate, there's a place where you go in, where the language changes on the signs, and where people's behaviors change, and where the customs change, and where the dates that are significant change. It's a Chinatown. Second one, fresh. A twist on something familiar. Does it startle you? Does it amaze you? Does it grab your attention? Can you make it your own somehow? Michael Motion. He didn't show us this particular act. I love Michael Motion stuff. I think it is incredibly unbelievable. And it has this freshness to it so that the moment you see it, you know you've never seen anything like it before. Right? It's got this electrifying quality to it. Third one, immersive. Can you feel it? Does it engage you? Do you lose yourself in it somehow? That's the idea of being immersed in an experience like these mud baths here, where you go and you truly immerse yourself into a sort of a feeling or an experience that you've never had before. Great experiences are immersive. Is it accessible? Can you get better at it? Can you understand it? Do you get the rules? Can you try it? You know, can you get it to do the things you want it to? This is what the out-of-box experience is all about. And this is what games that little kids play are typically about. Everybody knows the soccer rules, right, as little kids. It's a very accessible thing, and that's what allows them to play it in very interesting ways. Significant. Does it make you remember? Does it make you connect? Does it make you think or grow, and does it make sense? Okay, lots of things in our lives are significant, and those are the ones we particularly pay attention to. Look around you. You'll see things that people are doing that are significant. Ever stand at the Vietnam War Memorial, and you'll see it every day, all day. People, they come and they touch it, and they cry, and they leave things, you know. Significant things are like that. Your photo albums at home. The things that happen when a mother lends her own wedding dress to her daughter in order to get married in. That's what we mean by significance. And transformative. Do you feel different somehow? Do you have something to show for the experience? Right? Might others think that you have changed because you did this thing? And do you want to tell somebody about it afterwards? Very big example of things that are, in fact, important. Here's something fairly transformative. Okay? There are lots of things like this that are transformative. All right, so I've given you the notion that compelling experiences have 3 stages and 6 attributes. You can really understand it best when you realize that these 3 stages should be thought of as having the 6 attributes running across them. They're all like rheostats that you turn up or turn down. And you can use it in a really powerful way to try to puzzle through what's going on in the world and how to make it better and more compelling. And that's really how we go from this terrible thing called design theory to something incredibly vital, which is breakthrough products and services that change people's lives, or conferences that cause people to behave differently. Indeed, the thing that's interesting and obvious, sort of, is that you can take something that's already fun and make it screamingly hot. You can take something that's important and make it also compelling. You can take something that's boring and make it interesting, just using these rules that we're trying to give away. Now, despite the best efforts of the owners of Major League Baseball parks and the unions of Major League Baseball players, we still have a national pastime, right? And we can use the metrics that I've talked about to try to evaluate it. Just dropping them right on top of the baseball park, we can see that they are very defined stages, that some freshness, usually in some plays that happen. It's got some immersion in the middle part of it. It's very accessible all the way through, and because of the statistics, it's astonishingly accessible, unlike anything else that exists in the world of sports. As Stephen Jay Gould routinely reminds us, it's significant, and it is, in fact, transformative if you get deeply into it and you become particularly involved with a particular team. That's something that we like to do. Now imagine if we use the same exact kind of measurement system to take apart something in the world that is an everyday experience. Okay? This turns out to be the same exact slide. And I'd really like to go forward. I think I'm going backwards. I'm going... there we go. This is a grocery store. I'm going to go, believe it or not, it was important that we pause there slightly. Here's backwards. See all the color paint on there? As we go forwards to the grocery store, you see a lot less color paint. It's not as interesting an experience, right? That tells us right away that the grocery store could be fixed. That we could do things with the attributes and the stages to make it more interesting. And there's lots and lots of places where we can understand what goes on, where we can start to understand the 3 stages and the 6 attributes and make it better. But wait, there's more. Suppose we did this to a 5th grade math class, right? 5th grade math classes turn out to be damn dull, unless you turn out to be one of the 5% of the people, and mostly boys, who like mathematics intrinsically. What can we do to fix mathematics? It turns out there's almost nothing in the attraction category across any of these attributes. Golly, what are we doing to one another? You know, this is so simple to transform this and to make it fun. Personal finance. Is Scott still in the audience somewhere? I hope so. He's done a better job than any ex-P&G marketer I've ever seen about caring about end users. Okay? But I'm here to tell you there's a ways to go. Okay? I mean, most of us aren't doing anywhere near enough to deal with the fact that we're going to be stuck someday with, personal pension plans and personal financial management systems that the corporations that employ us no longer want us to pay attention to or manage for us, that the governments want to get out as fast as possible. It turns out to be a survival issue 20 years from now for most of us to be paying attention to our personal finances, and most of us don't. Why? Because of that astonishing principle that Edward de Bono taught us, that the fastest way to prevent somebody, the most certain way to prevent somebody from going from A to B is to give them a really exciting and sexy C, right? No one goes from here to sit home and plan your personal finances because your neurons are bouncing too much. You've got too many cool things that you want to do, and it turns out to be really, really dull to plan your personal finances, even though it's incredibly important to do so today more than ever. So that's an example of how you use these metrics. And by the way, when you just look around, it turns out there's a bazillion things need fixing this way. Okay? Helping us to manage health care differently, helping us to buy houses, plan for retirement, washing the dishes, getting a driver's license, learning how to have new forms of government or government participation. There's more than a few things need fixing. So we give these things to you as principles that you can use. Nana Nesbitt did an extraordinary job of listening to the nuts and kooks and eggheads at Doblin Group and turning it into something that's incredibly accessible, that's a puzzle in and of itself. We call it Zounds. It's got some qualities that you'll be able to easily discern. I'll give you only one hint about one of the ways you can play the game, and that's that on the 6 faces of the puzzles, when you solve them, you can find the principles illustrated in song and in story, and you'll find the stages in the vertical columns. And thank you very much. Appreciate it.